Hey friends, welcome back. A couple of weeks ago, you saw me do a video for an unboxing for the July Owl Crate, which the theme was Wanderlust. It was a really fun box and I enjoyed it a lot, and I was really excited to get into the book that was in it, which is called The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. And it's about an epic road trip between two best friends and one of the guy's sisters. And it's a really fun book. It's adorable and pretty epic, this like fun new take on history, basically. And conveniently, I took my own road trip when I started the book, although inconveniently, I actually can't read in the car, so I was stuck in the car for like 3 hours not being able to read, which is a bookworm's nightmare. Anyway, I'm going to review that for you right after the intro. Roll the intro! The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue is about a queer English lord who goes on a grand tour of Europe before he's allowed to take over his father's estate. And he goes on this tour with his best friend, who is sometimes ostracized for being half black, and his younger sister, who's going to go to finishing school and who's kind of a boss and like a big bibliophile. So, you know, it's kind of fun. You can relate to that character quite a bit. This book is marketed as a like hilarious new take on history. And it was a fun book, but I wouldn't say it quite lived up to the potential that I thought it was going to. One of the reasons for me that this book was a little bit disappointing, even though I enjoyed it, was the fact that I don't think it hit its comedic mark. I know that Mackenzie Lee hasn't written a lot of books, and I don't think her other book was a comedy, so it's understandable for a first-time author writing comedy to not quite make it. And one of the reasons for that is because comedy is so much harder than drama. Drama's easy, you just kill someone off, make two people fall out of love with each other, whatever, it's sad, we all cry, that's okay. Comedy's so much harder. It's all about timing, it's all about messing with the reader's expectations, that sort of thing. And this book wasn't doing that, for me at least. And one of the reasons that I didn't think this book lived up to its comedic potential was because there just wasn't enough levity. I appreciate when comedy has heart, because I don't want it to be just straight funny the whole time, but there was almost a little bit too much seriousness in this book for it to be a funny book. You know, it's kind of hard to laugh at a character who's uptight when suddenly you're confronted with the fact that he deals with racism all the time, and that's like a huge plot point in the book. You know, racism is something that's important to address, and I think it's a good thing to address it in a comedic book so that you can still laugh a little bit at the funny parts. But when a character's entire arc is kind of based around that, it makes it so it's hard to laugh at the things about that person that aren't so great or that make them kind of a funny character, because they're not really funny anymore if they're dealing with something that hard. They also deal with, you know, homophobia in this book, illnesses, all kinds of things, you know, family drama, abuse. So many dramatic things happen in this book, and so many serious themes are explored that for me, it turned into a drama, not a comedy. There were some moments that I think could have been really funny, where there's pirates, there's highwaymen, there's, you know, some funny romps, like romantic romps and stuff like that I think could have been hilarious, but it's kind of hard to make those funny when the entire book is revolving around such serious topics. Another thing about this book that I think would be good for readers to know, even though it's not really a critique so much as an observation, is that this book is a little bit racier than I imagined it to be. I think part of the reason for that is because it's written by a woman, but it's written about a man from a man's perspective, or like an 18-year-old man, I guess technically. And because it's written in that way, I think that there's some perspective there that I wasn't quite expecting when I read the book. I'm kind of used to reading YA books that are from a girl's perspective, so even if it's like a little bit more sexual or there's some romance going on, the author usually focuses on sensual things, romantic things, and doesn't really get too specific, I guess, about what the person is actually feeling in that moment of arousal. So this book was just a little bit surprising in that way. It's not something I usually encounter in YA. So that's just kind of a good thing to know, I guess, for readers who are thinking about reading this book. One of the positives I took away from this book is that the characters were pretty well written. They were well-rounded, they were interesting, they were diverse, and not just from each other, but just kind of in general in the YA, you know, bookosphere. It was kind of fun to read about characters like this, you know, someone who's biracial, someone who's queer, someone who's like a girl who's far ahead of her time. Those are fun things to read about, and all these characters felt distinct and interesting because of that, and for reasons besides that too. Sometimes they felt a little bit tropey, but I think kind of that was the point of the book. It made it a little hard to connect with them at times, but other than that, I thought it was fine. Besides that, with the characters, there were some issues for me with the romance, because there were times when it felt like the characters were almost being like purposefully obtuse to what was going on around them, and it got a little bit frustrating towards the end of the book to feel like I was kind of waiting for something to happen, and I wasn't really getting a lot of reward for that. Something else that I really loved about this book was the fact that because it's written about history, but it's like a new take on history, you kind of get this fun, different perspective on these historical things that are happening in the book. But you can also tell that Mackenzie Lee is a really well-researched person and that she actually put a lot of work into this. She does an author's note at the end where she kind of talks about the different historical things that she included in the book and the different like issues that she talks about in the book that are, you know, specific to that time period, specific to now, and kind of how she put that all into her, you know, unique book here that's not from like a typical historical perspective. I really admire an author who's willing to do that much research to put into like a book like this, especially because, you know, she can't say that it's historically accurate because it's not. You know, it's characters who are kind of ahead of their time and would be more suitable to like this time period technically, but at the same time, she works really hard to make sure that the rest of the book really does do history justice. My overall thoughts on this book are that although I had some problems with it, I think it's worth reading. I wouldn't call it a must-read, but I think if you're looking for something that's kind of fun, historical, has some, you know, has a lot of heart to it, and kind of tackles some really hard topics, this is a book that you might really enjoy. It's well written in terms of like prose style, and even though there were times where I felt like it was getting a little bit heavy, it was still a fun read. If you're looking for another book in this same genre, this kind of new take on history with some funny bits thrown into it, a book I really recommend that I kind of liked more than this one is My Lady Jane, which is written by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. It's a really fun book, and they take the story of Jane Grey, who was only queen for like 9 days and then got beheaded. They take her story and they write her a new one because they feel like she deserved a happy ending. So this book is really fun, it's funny, it's like to me it's like a fresh take on what was a really tragic story, and I would highly recommend this book if you're looking for something in the same vein of A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. Thanks so much for watching my review of A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. Please let me know if you've loved it or if you hated it, and let me know in the comments how you felt about it. Please like and subscribe, and have a great day. Bye.